Right, last video on bishop versus knight, and it's about good knight versus bad bishop, particularly in closed positions. So I've done lots of good stuff on when the knight has an advantage, when it sort of dominates, or it can do loads of sneakery and forks. Talked about fixing pawns on the same colour as the bishop. But there's one final thing which usually includes the fixing, which is if the position's quite closed. So yeah, I've got 3 or 4 positions to go through. This first one is a game from 1915. It's white to play. It's not particularly difficult to win this, but it is just sort of instructive. It's not like you have to be particularly, you can't really mess it up really. You just keep playing sensible moves. It's not one of those ones where you have to play the right move at the right time. White's advantage is so good that they can do not hurry in the end game and get there eventually. I mean, look at the position. This so many of White's pawns, Black's pawns, sorry, are fixed on light squares, with this bishop kind of stuck behind them at the moment. If you had to guess which opening this pawn structure came from, I don't actually know for sure, but I'd be fairly certain this was a French. And if you play the French as black, you've got to worry about what's called the French bishop. It's called the French bishop for a reason, is that you don't want to get lumbered with just that bishop against one of your opponent's other minor pieces, especially a knight, because it could be a problem. It can be a problem in the middle game, or if you end up in an end game with just your French bishop against a knight, which is exactly what's happened here, you're probably going to lose. And black is going to lose this. This is just a massive advantage for white. So let's see how white finished it off, game from 1915. King f2 was played, and then black played king e7. If instead of king e7, where black's going to try and sort of hold white up, white's plan is just to march the king to c5, and black's going to stick their king on c7 and go for a passive defence, claiming, well, I've got the queen side sort of held up, and you're not going to be able to do anything with your knight by itself. And it's just like, well, I think that's ambitious. This knight's going to hop around all over the place and cause mayhem whilst this rubbish bishop does nothing. But let's say black tried to be a bit more active and create a bit of counter-attack, which is what you should do really, if you can. Here it doesn't really get you anywhere. Like king f7, king e2, king g6. The knight can come to e3, and if the black king tries to make more progress, g3. And this is a barrier. These 2 squares are controlled by the knight. All of these squares are controlled by pawns, and we can even play this pawn advance as well to completely finish off that barrier if necessary. If black played h5, we can play h4 check if we really need to. So yeah, and whilst all that's going on, by the way, that the white king's just sort of got a free reign over here, and yeah, you can see it's just going to be carnage. So king f2, king e7, king e3, black brings their king to c7, but the white king's got to c5 already. Probably fixing this pawn on a light square as well, because if this pawn moves, knight d4 is going to pick off the b5 pawn. So yeah, incredible stuff. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 pawns fixed on light squares with the black bishop just stuck behind them, that rubbish French bishop. Black plays bishop c8, and now white, I mean, what would you do here as white? What's your plan? Because like your king's in a great place, black's just completely tied down. Like, what should your plan be? You kind of don't want to start upsetting the queen side, or indeed the king side with pawn advances, although those moves are probably fine. I mean the engine's actually saying g3 and h4. Oh, not that. g3 and h4 as moves. But white just sort of did a very good idea in my view, which is just to hop the knight over to the king side and start hassling these 2. And by hassling those 2, he managed to bring them forward and keep hassling them. So knight to b4, bishop b7, played g3 anyway. Oh, that's a good idea, by the way, because the bishop's come to b7. What you don't want to do is swap this pawn for this pawn. Okay, so black might be threatening d4 here, swapping those pawns. Alright, you might get the a6 pawn, but you just don't need these complications. You don't even need to think about it. There's no reason not just to play g3. That's it. If you want to play d4 to get your bishop out, you do that, but you've just lost a pawn. And white can probably even play d5 and push it, because a swap on d5 is definitely not going to help black, as that pawn ending's clearly won. So yeah, g3, good move, and black just stays passive. Bishop c8, here comes the knight to d3, knight to f4, and here we go. We're going to threaten to start hassling those pawns. So black played g6, and every time black plays a pawn move, it leaves a weakness somewhere else, and the knight just keeps hopping about. You know, it doesn't work the other way around. Black's got a light squared bishop. Our pawns are on dark squares. That's it. They just never get hassled. If you've got a knight can hop. Well, a knight has to hop from a white to a black to a white square. h6 stops the knight coming into g5, but now the g6 pawn's weak again. Back to f4, g5, and now, yeah, that knight's coming into f6. Bishop has to move. Knight back to g4. Now the h pawn has to move. Knight to e3, and yeah, we've just left the king on c5. We've left our pawns on dark squares, and black's just had no choice really but to bring those pawns forward, and they're sort of even weaker now, where the knight can keep attacking them. What black wants to play here is to finally get a pawn onto a dark square, and actually quite far up the board as well, which that might give white something to think about. I mean, probably not, because we've got our pawn on h2, so that's just always going to block it. There's no way the bishop can ever take that. But yeah, that's what black would like to play. h4. The problem is it just loses a pawn straight away. You just swap and play knight g2. That pawn's gone. And there's just no counter attack for black. Just, you know, you take my h pawn, I'll take your... What are you going to take? Nothing. So yeah, knight e3. In the game, bishop g6 was played, and of course that allows, well, pause the video if you like. What should white play here? It should just be an instant h4. I actually played a game last night which involved, at one stage, could have developed into a good knight versus bad bishop endgame, and it went from the opening to the endgame very, very quickly. And yeah, pretty early on in the game, I had a chance to fix pawns in this way, and I took it. I mean, the game's developed in a slightly different direction, but I think it was still a good move. Hopefully, I'm learning something from all this. Because I think in the knight versus bishop fixing video, I showed another game I played 2 years ago where I had the ideas, but I just didn't do them early enough. So my game last night, I did them early. I fixed those pawns early. Anyway, bishop to g6. If black doesn't like this fixing, which black shouldn't, and we've seen h4 doesn't work, that's what they'd like to play, but they could try, instead of bishop g6, g4 to sort of do the fixing on their terms. Maybe that looks less bad than just one pawn literally fixed on h5. I mean, this is still sort of fixed, isn't it? Because it can't go to h4, but it's not fixed by the laws of chess. It is allowed to move. But white's going to have the same thing. We're going to bring a knight to f4, where it's going to multitask, attack those two. That'll tie down the black bishop, and we have all these reserve tempi over here that can be used to create that zugzwang situation, which is what happened in the game. So yeah, knight e3, bishop g6, fixing, well played, takes, bishop e4. And what white wants to do now is bring their knight to f4. So black's just going to work like stink to try and stop that. But they're not going to be able to. They're not going to be able to stop that. Knight f1. Okay, that was one of the few white squares available. Bishop f3, knight to d2 attacks the bishop, bishop to e2, really just trying to, stop the activity of the knight. We can get it to d4 though, knight b3, bishop g4, there it comes to d4, and now, I mean, the bishop's sort of dominating the knight, or is the knight dominating the bishop? It's that I have an amusing debate with Alex about this when we analyse positions. And my conclusion is that whenever the bishop and the knight face off like this, the piece that dominates the other is the one that is on Alex's side. So hope he doesn't mind me saying that little joke, but yeah, it seems that way at times. Although I'm sure lots of times I get it wrong. Yeah, I don't know. But here I think the knight is dominating the bishop. We'll see. So yeah, bishop back to h3, and that's it. The knight's getting to f4. I suppose it can't really go the other way, can it? Because you could just take it and play king takes d5. That's because I tried bishop d1. Oh no, you can't. So you need to keep control of the e pawns. Yes, the knight coming to d4. There you go. This is the thing. I didn't even think about that. That when you're playing good knight versus bad bishop, you just sort of black's always got a problem that the side of the bishop's always got a problem, and eventually you just, and we've all had that in our games, haven't we, where our opponents played something, you go, oh, why did you do that? That's helped me. And then it's because you haven't. Oh, if they'd done that, I could have won even more easily with this. Bit lucky, really, in a way, isn't it, when that happens? Bishop h3, knight to e2, bishop back to f5, and finally we've got the knight to f4. Okay, so f7 and g4 are the two squares. Couldn't get to f7, obviously, and probably rather be on g4. That seems a better square. So the black bishop's sort of well placed, but it now has to stay there. And we have all these reserve tempi. b4, still got another one if we need to use it, which we don't. We're in. And yeah, and this was the b5 pawn's about to fall, so black came to defend it, but then the e6 pawn falls, and black just resigned. Next, this is an exercise in the Dvoretsky endgame manual, and white to play. And I was sort of a bit surprised this was here. I sort of looked at it and I didn't really see what the exercise was. I mean, we can see this bishop is astonishingly poor. I mean, it literally is in prison. It is imprisoned by its own pawns. It just can't get out at all. The only thing I was thinking is there some sort of subtlety with black playing e4, a well-timed e4? But not really. I think it was an exercise from the point of view of you can't stop black putting their king on c8. So what's your plan? What's your plan from there? And I guess it's about thinking in schemes. In the endgame, we need to think schematically rather than brute force calculation. It's things like, well, I'll move my king to a8. You can't play king a8 on the next move, obviously. But you can see there's not anything complicated going on that stops us from saying, okay, well, I'll get my king to a8 and then I'll do this. So that's the sort of the thinking schematically. The only thing you should think about, although it's not a problem at all, is, right, I'm going to move my king to a8 and then I'm going to do such and such. It's like, well, hang on a minute. Think about that. Think about that black pawn push, because that's the only thing that black can do. Okay. So yeah, we'll think about that pawn push as we go. We're going to get the king to a8. By the way, the plan is if the black king is on c8, we're going to put our king on a8, bring the knight to a7, and deliver a check, and then our king is into b7, and then we can reroute. By the way, in all of this, we'd like to have our knight on e6, but there's no way to get it there for now. So yeah, king d3, king f7, king c4, king e8. Yeah, see, I would have half an eye on, what if black says, well, now you're going over here, I'm going to come and do a counter-attack, king f6. Okay, because if king b5, maybe e4. As it is, this is just useless, this counter-attack. It's way too slow. F takes e4, the engine's got +7. Okay, because our king's going to come and gobble this up and marched this one way before the Black Kings had time to hassle this knight off the defence of e4, or possibly even take that. I think you probably can just leave your knight there. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I imagine that's even a possible plan. But you just don't need to think about any of that. If the king comes back to f6, the engine says it's fine, but I'm a human being, not an engine, and as a human being, I say we can play that. Okay, just leave the knight there, so black's literally got nothing, and they're surely going to have to come and meet your king with a king c8. Anyway, the book sort of skirts over that. It just sort of is probably because it's so not really a viable plan for black. They just doesn't even talk about it. But that's something I think we should think about. It's all very well saying, well, I'll put my king on a8 and then do this. It's like, well, hang on, what about e4? Does e4 do anything? The answer is no, but it's only a matter of time, isn't it, if we're playing chess and not thinking about these things, that one day it will do something. It's like, oh, I didn't think about that. It's like, well, you should have thought about it. Anyway, let's get that king to a8 after all that waffling. I mean, black's just got nothing. Bishop f6, knight into e4, hassle that bishop. Again, I suppose that was about delaying maybe possibly an e4 pawn sack. Just knight back there, fork the bishop and the pawn. The bishop has to drop back and defend the pawn. King to a8. In the endgame, do not hurry. Okay, that knight e4 probably wasn't even necessary. Now we want to get our knight to a7. Well, that's a very easy path to a7, isn't it? Don't need to think about it. And finally, black can play e4. It just achieves nothing. Because that bishop's out, but out to do what? All of our pawns are on white squares. There's the knight a7 check. King d8, king b7. Black plays bishop c3, realising that you're coming for their c7 pawn. Bishop back to a5. And now finally, if you want to, you can get your knight to e6, where it's going to be forking those two. It also forks the king, so the king can't even stay on the defence of c7, and it's a very easy win. In the game, this is a game from 1938. Sorry if I didn't say that already, although I doubt anyone cares. But it is a game from 1938. White did something that, I mean, fine if they calculated it, but it does sort of contradict the principle of in the endgame, do not hurry. I don't know if I'd have been disappointed in myself for this next move, but I think we should just first of all be looking at, right, well, can we just do some sensible stuff that we don't even have to think about that, do we? It's not like we're risking anything. It's just keep applying the pressure. It's so obviously won. I think that would be very easy to see that as a win. It comes across like white has seen this as a possibility and then correctly analysed it, but didn't do the, was it Lasker? If you find a good move, sit on your hands and find a better one, something along those lines. Anyway, knight takes e6 is a flashy finish, I suppose. It works. And yeah, e5, but I'd be a bit nervous about this. It's just like, why did you do this? You didn't need to give black this pass pawn. I mean, all right, you can see that it's going to be a queen. And so anyway, black plays bishop c7, e6, bishop back to a5, and engine reckons c7 check. But the guy goes for e7 check, just as good, and black resign there. Right, next, this is a game from 1936 where Botvinnik was white. Botvinnik correctly identified that playing this c6 move was a good idea. He was a former world champion, arguably one of the best positional players of all time. Very close position here. We've got black pawns fixed on light squares, which he doesn't want. The closed position is going to favour the knight on top. I mean, these squares aren't fixed on these pawns, sorry, aren't fixed on light squares. I'll talk English eventually. But it's still very closed. Like this c6 move goes against the principle of fixing on such and such a square, but there's also the principle of like black has no space, and it's not difficult to see that our knight can get to e6. So c6 is a good move to play. You know, what can black do to stop that plan, as it were? Well, in the game, Botvinnik plays c6 now, and this was too early. This is now a draw. It wasn't a draw before. The engine goes from plus 4.9 to plus a half there. So black brought their bishop to d3, king back to c3, just to clear that path for the knight. But then black played b5, again sort of going against the principles by deliberately fixing their own pawn in the light square. But you've got to be careful, even in knight versus bishop, the position doesn't become so closed that you haven't got enough space to move. And apparently they agreed a draw here, because, alright, we can get our knight to e6, but that b5 move's quite clever, because after knight d4, bishop c4, all your pawns are gone. That's still a draw, by the way, but which is interesting, actually, isn't it? It looks like we've sort of trapped our knight. How are we getting our knight out there? It's interesting. But the engine still reckons that's drawn. I'm interested. I'm intrigued on this. I should have prepped this, but king is. Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's just coming back to d5. So even that pawn ending's drawn. That's interesting. You'd be a bit nervous about that, though, wouldn't you? Because if you can keep your knight on the board, it's obviously drawn. You just hop your knight around all over the place. Leave your king on d4, completely drawn. In fact, it might even still be one for white if you get your knight back in. But anyway. After seeing that clever trick during the game, Botvinnik went home and quickly, I don't know if he did it at home, but after the game apparently he analysed and said that c6 is the right idea, but it needs to be prepped with king c3, so that you're ready already to do this hopping plan, which has to be in green and then red. Me and my colour coding. Me and my brilliant colour coding. So now if bishop d3, this time it does work. Okay, knight d4. If we see b5, knight into e6. Okay. If instead of b5 we see b takes c5, b takes c5, d takes c5. I guess we've just got a pawn down. Knight back to c3. Black plays c4, and you got a couple of choices here actually. One obvious one is knight a5, which is still massively winning. But not if the point of it after bishop f1, say, was to take on c4. Okay, that's not a winning plan. Okay, but you can still sort of change your mind and play knight c6 or even king b4, and you're still completely winning that. But yeah, if your plan was to take on c4, then this is a drawn pawn ending. It doesn't take long to see that d4 and d6 are corresponding squares. If the white king was on c5, the black king would need to be on d7 to stop the white king coming into c6. So if d4 and d6 correspond and d7 and c5 correspond, then obviously if white's on c4 ready to move to red or green, black needs to be on e7 ready to move to red or green. And black is on, so yeah, black has the corresponding square, and so yeah, that's the draw. White could go back and mess around a bit with triangulation, but as long as black understands those corresponding squares, that's the draw. So after c4, knight a5 doesn't mess it up, but it does if you then take the pawn and go into the pawn ending, which is a draw. But much simpler is just to come into d4, where then if bishop f1, then you've got knight b5. King e7, knight takes c7, king comes back to d6. Black's still going to be a pawn up here. Knight d4 check, king takes d5, knight d4, and there's your pawn back, and yeah, it's gone. It's just completely gone. That's going to be fine. Where have we got to there? So that's if Yeah, that's if black plays bishop d3. This time it does work. Knight d4. So instead, black might try bishop b7 and just say, well, I'm not still going to stop your knight coming into e6. I can put my bishop back to c8, but then we can go through with this c6 plan. If bishop back to a6, knight into d4, we're probably going to transpose. And if bishop c8, knight d4, black can just sort of say, well, your knight's not coming into e6 because I've got it covered, and I'm also defending my f5 pawn, so you got nothing. King e7. I mean, you could have this as a pause the video moment if you wanted to. What's your plan? What's the winning plan for white here? What would you do? It's about thinking schematically again, isn't it? It's not like, well, I'm going to play such and such on my next move. It's just like, all right, what's your plan? How are you going to break down this this insolence of I'm just going to leave my bishop here and move my king around, and you got nothing? Well, your plan should be to bring your king to b5 and then sack the knight for the b6 pawn. That should be your plan. And black's got nothing against this plan. King b3, king d8, king a4, king e7, king b5, and engine reckons plus 39. I don't really know what these numbers mean. Does anyone know what it means when the engine says plus 39? Because I've had positions where it's like plus 65 or something, and I've only got 2 pawns left. So, well, I can get 2 queens. That's 18, isn't it? 2 lots of 9. I don't know what the numbers mean. What does plus 39 mean? Anybody know? Anyway, one more position to go through. So this is a game in the first World Championship match between Karpov and Kasparov back in 1984, the one that got cancelled. And then they played another one. I'm massively hazy on the details, and to be honest, I've never really cared. It's just entertaining I've always just been interested in the chess games that went on without caring too much about the history. I mean, I was 6 at the time. It's amazing how long that maths just took me. I was born in 78. How old was I in 1984? So yeah, I was 6 at the time, and didn't even play chess. So yeah, I wasn't following it. It's black to play. Kasparov's black. I'm not going to go through this one particularly much, but what I am going to do is, because this is such a sort of a famous good knight versus bad bishop position, and it's been gone through by all your different chess YouTubers all over the place. There's a guy called Kingcrusher who makes pretty good chess videos in my view. Very good chess videos actually in my view. And what I'm going to do is put a link to his video in the description that goes through this Karpov Kasparov match. And I think it's around 16 minutes into that video it gets to this position. And I also should say, I don't know, I should say, but I'm going to say, obviously all these videos I'm putting together, my endgame project to sort of keep going through this book, it's just me trying to get through this book, and this book's just amazing. It's unbelievably hard, but it goes through this game to death in this book. Okay, so if I'm going to keep making videos on this book, then obviously I should be recommending, you should buy this book. Otherwise, what with these videos going viral, I think we're up to like 5 people watching some of them. So these videos going viral, which means that pretty soon the writers of this book, they're going to be coming after us, aren't they? They say, "Oh, you Belper Chess Club, copyright and all that business." So yeah, buy the book. It goes through this position to death. But I'll go through the interesting bit. This is obviously good knight versus bad bishop, fairly close position again. All these pawns on fixed on light squares. It's black to move, and Kasparov plays this. G takes h4. Now pause the video and decide what would you do here. Now, of course, once someone says that, imagine if you're playing a game and someone said, pause the video, pause here, and what would you do next? It'd be really, really good, wouldn't it? Because well, you just take the pawn back if no one had made you think about it. And White's got a slight advantage after taking the pawn back, but this is a situation where I presume Karpov was thinking, well, okay, I've got a good knight versus a bad bishop, but how am I getting in here? What's my plan? Because if I just take that pawn back, or I've got a slight advantage, but where's my king infiltrating, basically? Like the black pawns have sort of got it fairly covered between them with and a, I don't know what the hell that was. All these squares, in fact that one can go a bit further, can't it? Covered. So how's the white king getting in? So after g takes h4, if you've paused the video to think about it, it's not going to take you long to find. The only difficult thing here is, and that is a massively difficult thing, is to get your brain to not just take the pawn back by hand. That's the only difficult thing. I'm not saying it's not a difficult thing. It's a very difficult thing, but thankfully Karpov is quite a good chess player, and he can get his head to, or he could at the time get his head to think, well, I don't have to take that pawn back. Let's have a think about it. How am I getting my king in? And yeah, knight g2. Watch the video by kingcrusher. It's very good, and it goes through this game, which I'm now just going to sort of whiz through. But yeah, hg, king takes g3, king e6, knight f4 check, and that's your h pawn back straight away, and the white king was in. In it goes. Okay, d5 pawn goes. I suppose there black had a choice of, could have swapped the f pawns, but you can see that's pretty bad. And just because of the way this knight hops around and all these pawns fall, and there was a bit of manoeuvring around here. Kasparov gets his king to c4, which is obviously pretty good. I mean, I'm going through it at top speed here, so I'm not necessarily going to follow everything. But eventually Karpov broke through, and Kasparov won the game there. So that's another good demonstration of good knight versus bad bishop. Great start to the position. Covered to death in there, and yeah, and I'll put a link to the kingcrusher video in the description of this video as soon as I've worked out how to do it. I don't think I've ever done that before. Right, that's enough on good knight versus bad bishop, and that's all the bishop versus knight stuff done.